Hello everyone, and don't worry, you are not lost. Welcome to Art of the Week with Katya, episode 13, Art and Cinema. So this week we're going to do something kind of fun. We're going to talk about, actually it would be more accurate to say cinema and art. Cinema moments that are quoting various art pieces. So let's get started. So our first film tonight is called Il Gattopardo, the Leopard. Probably many of you have seen the Netflix version recently, but what you don't know is that a long time ago, a very famous Italian filmmaker, Visconti, made a version of this book. And what this book is about, really, it's about a Norman family who was of the upper class of Sicily for a very, very long time, and how the reign of the Bourbons and the unification of Italy changes Sicilian hierarchical classes very, very much. And what you're seeing in this film is the gradual, but of course semi-painful, embracing of this noble family into the realization that they are no longer the future of Italy. Exactly. And so this moment that's captured in the film precisely is a moment where the actor says, "O Stella, o fedele Stella, quando ti desiderai un appuntamento meno effimero, lontano da tutto, nella mia ragione di perenne certezza," which means, "O star, O faithful star, when you decide a date less passing, away from everyone, in your reason, in your everlasting certainty." One can only imagine. So this is particularly an image of the Duke, the head of the Norman family, whose job it was under the Spanish kings to take care of at least a part of Sicily. That was his feudal job, because Sicily was under feudal law for centuries after the rest of Europe broke from feudal law. And in this film, in this moment, this book, it's actually very poetic, because it's about a noble family who renounces what they know, who renounces wealth and nobility and all of these things. And I don't know if you know this, but the director, Visconti, did this in favor of communism, in favor of what he deemed a good cause. And what was in many ways. But what this moment is describing, a couple of a priest and a bellboy, a boy who rings the bells, comes by, and it's after the Duke has attended this very long party, which takes up most of the film. And there's this moment where it can only, I think, really be recognized as this moment of kind of faith of the Duke, because it's this moment when he realizes that it's one of the many moments when he realizes that his time as Duke, his family's time as nobility, is numbered. Really is numbered. Sicily has already joined the rest of what would be Italy. It's not yet Italy, of unification. And he's dealing with this. He's dealing with the fact that Sicily is not what it used to be, what he knew it to be. Certainly not when he was young, probably not in the middle of his life. He's kind of closer. He's elderly at this point. And what's interesting to note is that Visconti actually, in this moment, utilized a little bit of art history. He actually utilized a comparison, for some reason, with this portrait of Verdi. Now, I don't know how much you all know about Verdi, but Verdi was a very influential composer of Italian origin, of course, around the same time, around the time of the unification, more or less, of Italy. Of course, it's much more complex than that. I have been reminded many times by locals that it is much more complex than that. And of course, Sicily's involvement is much more complex than that. But this is a painting by Boldini at around the same time. And it's very interesting because it's actually one of two paintings of Verdi. This one was done in the 1880s. And it was the second one that was done. And you can really see an almost impressionistic kind of art form that is done in this case. And unlike the other portrait, which was given to Verdi, the composer himself, this one was hung in Rome. It was never given to the composer, which is also very interesting. There's a lot of very interesting points about this portrait, but Boldini was he was a very upper class artist in Italy, and he mostly followed the trends. So the fact that he didn't follow the trends for this particular portrait is quite interesting. And the fact that Visconti is using his upper class almost gentility to create this equivalence between the Duke and Verdi in this sense. Verdi, who was a composer who was often cited for his being with the people of Italy and the unification of Italy, not with the royalty like we see here. It's very interesting and it's very unusual. I think it very much adds to the many, many layers of this film. And many would say that this film is very artistic in its sense. But since this is also a Halloween-y episode, we will get spookier as time goes on. So our next film is The Rescuers. Now, I grew up with this film since I was a very young child. I don't know if any of you in my audience grew up with this film, or probably you saw this film when you were much older adults, parents of children who were young children when this film came out. But to be honest, from my generation, we all thank you, because this film, believe it or not, was filled with paintings. Many, many, many paintings that were made by... So these paintings were made by Don Griffith in 1977 when this film came out. So even our parents' generation probably saw this film. And they really are, these actually are canvases. There are moments in the opening credits where you can actually see the weave of the fabric. These are real canvases, these are real paintings that happen in the credits of The Rescuers. And there actually is a reason why they were like this. Like I said, this would get more spooky as it went on. It kind of does. These were reminiscent of the paintings of Turner, as you can see here. Now, this is a moment of kind of stillness between Turner and the paintings that you see in the opening credits of The Rescuer. But the way that nature is revealing or participating in various injustices and the looseness of the paint as a medium The fact that the paint as a medium gets to even play a part in the artwork itself, in the artwork of the film, in the artwork of the original artwork itself, is massive in both cases. The fact that the film that got to be artistic, the fact that the art piece was even the paint, the medium itself was taking place in the creation and realizing of the art piece itself. This is what kept Turner out of academic showings. This is what made Turner so incredibly revolutionary, and why he's studied so much these days by art historians. And The Rescuers takes his sublimity of nature, the sublime nature of nature, in order to reveal something within it, something so sinister as a bottle that's revealing a message from a young girl who needs help. This is it's very reminiscent, and it's very beautiful the way that it's done. And as I said, we would get spookier as it went on. Our next piece is none other than Crimson Peak itself, another masterpiece of Guillermo del Toro, who, as we know, loves his monsters as much as many other directors in Hollywood have. And he really has turned horror and monsters into a true art form. And there are so many people who have published about the true artistry of Crimson Peak. There is so much artistry involved. But here, in this particular moment of the dance scene, we see, I've chosen a still that's particularly artistic, but truth be told, there are so many in this scene. It is actually well known by costume historians that most of the dresses in this scene come from real paintings of this era. And there's even great theses and so forth that have been published concerning the incredible accurateness of these costumes. For example, the costume of Edith, her immense softness, and the softness of colors, and the brightness of the colors of her costume, how it goes very much with the Art Nouveau movement, and with a movement that embraced very much the female form in ways that costume of her era, and very interesting era, the end of the 19th and early 20th centuries, really was experimenting with very many new things. And then our Art Nouveau movement really worked to make this possible, this experimentation with new ideas and new ways of dressing. And we can see actually that this image very much corresponds with, yet again, Boldini's Woman with a Black Sash, which was done at the end of the 19th century. Now, as we can see, these images are very similar. The costume is very obviously taken from this painting, as many costumes in this ballroom are taken from various paintings. But this painting is very special because it's very much reminiscent of John Singer Sargent, the elongation of the female form, the relishing in the curves of the female body. Not only is this very Art Nouveau, but it is also a relishing in the high society of the time. Only a high society woman would have been able to afford a dress like this. And that is part of the point, right? Edith is a high society woman, even though she's from upstate New York. She is a high society woman. She would have worn European dresses no less different than this one in this part of the film. And what is extraordinary is the complete relishing in this point of life. It's very John Singer Sargent. From this standpoint, John Singer Sargent is really an immensely interesting artist from this perspective. And it's really quite, even though the movie is a horror film, this moment in the film truly shows a part of the film's artistry, the way in which the film truly goes to new measures to show true adherence, not only to this era, but to some of the ways in which this era relished within itself, is truly extraordinary. And moving on to the scariest of them all, and this may not seem obvious, but it's true. Howl's Moving Castle. Now, this film is an artistic masterpiece from every single perspective, and if you have not seen it, I highly recommend dropping everything and seeing it as soon as possible, because it is a wonderful, wonderful film. So, as mentioned, this film is incredibly artistic and incredibly symbolic. The story within itself is incredibly symbolic as well, and the artistry by Hayao Miyazaki is an incredible, incredible pairing with the story itself. And it's the film is a little bit different from the original story, which has publicly been acknowledged and given permission to be recreated in this way by the author of the original story itself. And the difference in the film is that the film adds more of an emphasis on the war that's mentioned in the book, which brings forth the theme of peace and of the importance of peace. And what's extraordinary, though, about this is one of the war scenes. What's extraordinary about these scenes is their tie, I think, art historically to the paintings of Hieronymus Bosch. Now, this comes from one of the panels of the Haywain triptych, which is one of Bosch's most famous triptychs. The other one is the Garden of Earthly Delights. This particular triptych was finished in 1500. And like a lot of Bosch's work, it includes not only a lot of the absurd, but also this very detailed and imaginative hell scene. And what's extraordinary about this comparison is that this, I think, reveals one of the most powerful things that art can do, which is to tell a story without linearly telling it like language can. In language, we say, war is hell, creating a collocation between the two things that is fairly linear. First comes war, second comes hell. But by creating this equivalency, Miyazaki is creating a situation of war as hell, wherein the two states are simultaneously represented. And this is truly extraordinarily powerful. And this is truly the magic of antilinearity in art, and how much cinema oftentimes actually, goes to show us, to describe things to us, to describe emotions and events beyond what language can do, using these very artistic references and these very artistic means. Thank you so much, and looking forward to see you next time on Art of the Week with Katya. See you soon!